The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the forest in hues of orange and pink as the Johnson family pulled into the campsite. Emily, wide-eyed with excitement, bounced in her seat, peering out the window to catch glimpses of vibrant wildflowers and the towering trees that swayed gently in the breeze. "Can we go hiking right after we set up?" she pleaded, her voice brimming with anticipation. "Let's get the tent ready first," her mother Sarah replied, a warm smile playing on her lips. "Then we can explore." Mark, Emily's father, grunted in agreement as he unloaded gear. From the trunk, his brow creased with concentration. Though he adored his daughter, the weight of responsibility often made him stern. "You can wander, but stay close to the campsite. We don't want any accidents." "Okay, Dad," Emily said, undeterred. As they unpacked, Mark and Sarah set to work on the tent, while Emily busied herself collecting sticks, creating what she deemed a fort. The campsite buzzed with the sounds of nature, birds chirping and leaves rustling in the wind, and the air was fresh, filled with the scent of pine and earth. Later that evening, as the family gathered around the fire, roasting hot dogs and sharing stories, the familiar warmth of family life enveloped them. Emily giggled, causing her parents' hearts to swell with affection. They loved these moments, a welcome escape from the busyness of their daily lives. As the fire crackled, dark clouds rolled in, casting long shadows across the campsite. A distant rumble of thunder echoed through the trees, drawing wary glances from both parents. "Looks like a storm might be coming," Mark remarked, his tone grave. "We should keep an eye on the weather. If it gets too bad, we might have to pack up." Sarah nodded, her smile dimming slightly. "Let's hope it holds." Off until morning. Emily, however, was undeterred by the changing weather. "I want to explore. There are hidden treasures in the woods," she exclaimed, a bright spark of curiosity lighting up her face. Her parents exchanged glances, a silent agreement forming. "After dinner, we'll take a quick walk before bed," Sarah promised, ruffling Emily's hair. Excitement bubbled within Emily as they finished their meal. Once the dishes were cleaned, the family set out together, the darkening sky swirling with a mix of shadows and muted light. The wind picked up as they wandered through the trees, the sounds of the forest shifting into a chorus of creaks and whispers. Emily ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the woods. Mark and Sarah maintained a cautious distance, alert to their surroundings. "Stay within sight, Em," Mark called, trying to make his voice sound light, but it carried an edge of worry. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting deepening shadows, Emily ran farther ahead, entranced by a flickering light that she had spotted through the trees. "Just a little further," she called, her voice mingling with the murmur of the leaves. Mark frowned, a sense of unease creeping into his bones. "That wasn't the plan, Em," he shouted back, but his warning was drowned out by the distant rumble of thunder. When Emily didn't respond, he quickened his pace, his heart pounding. "Emily!" he shouted, his voice filled with a rising sense of panic. Sarah followed closely, her instincts flaring. "Where did she go?" she muttered, glancing around as the forest seemed to close in around them. As the wind howled and the storm began to unleash its fury, Emily's absence became palpable. "We need to find her. Now!" Mark shouted, the protective instincts overwhelming him. Frantic, the couple retraced their steps back to the clearing where they had last seen her, shouting her name until it became a hoarse whisper. The dark silhouette of the trees loomed above them, hiding their daughter from sight. When they reached their campsite, fear seized them fully. The tent flapped violently in the wind, and the fire had extinguished. "Emily!" Sarah cried out, her voice breaking as tears blurred her vision. Mark grabbed his phone to call for help, but his hands trembled too much to dial. "It's okay. It's going—" As night fell, the campsite transformed into a maze of darkness, the rustling leaves mimicking the whispers of fear that filled the hearts of both parents. Mark and Sarah gathered their belongings, alerting other campers nearby about their missing daughter. Local authorities responded quickly, with helicopters and search teams combing the area. Detective Anna Rosen arrived, assessing the situation efficiently. "We'll start a grid search. We need everyone in positions quickly," she directed the gathered volunteers, their faces etched with concern. Mark's demeanor shifted between anxiety and anger, watching as the officers organized the search. He wanted to scream, to demand they find Emily faster. "She's out there! She's scared!" he shouted, desperation tainting his words. "Calm down, sir," Detective Rosen advised, her voice steady and professional. "We'll do everything we can." Rosen focused on gathering information about Emily, noting details like her clothing and personality traits, cataloging everything to share with the search teams. As people spread out into the woods, a dark storm loomed overhead, the weight of the clouds mirroring the heaviness in Sarah's chest. Mark began to act strangely, his conversation short, his gestures abrupt as moments turned into hours. "Keep looking. We have to find her." He snapped at an officer, his tone desperate. Detective Rosen kept a close eye on the father's behavior, noting the erratic nature of his actions. Despite his frantic demeanor, she perceived a restlessness beneath the surface, leading her to question just how deep his concern truly ran. Before dawn broke on the second day of searching, officers found remnants of Emily's belongings, a small teddy bear that had slipped from her grasp, and dark smudges on the ground where she had stumbled. The discovery sent ripples of dread through the searching teams. "They're getting closer," Mark murmured, anxiety threading through his voice. "They'll find her, one way or another." But as the hours dragged on, the reality of the situation became increasingly dire. News outlets began reporting on the story, pulling the community's heartstrings and bringing people together in a desperate bid for hope. With each passing hour, Mark felt the walls closing in on him. Despite the efforts to keep focused on the search, the pressure and suspicion began to gnaw at his resolve. Detective Rosen pulled him aside, wanting to understand the dynamics of the family in more detail. "Mark, have you had any disagreements with Emily recently? Any signs of trouble in your relationship?" His eyes widened, a spark of indignation flashing across his face. "This is not about me. My daughter is missing." "Of course, but we need to understand the full picture," Rosen pressed, keeping her tone calm. Sarah stepped in, concern etched across her features. Emily was adventurous. She might have just wandered off too far. The conversation turned tense, and as the sun began to set on the second night without their daughter, emotions frayed and suspicions began coiling around Mark's heart. On the third day, the search had grown frantic, a race against time. The crackling sounds of walkie-talkies filled the air as teams searched every nook of the dense woods. Detective Rosen felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, but remained determined to lead the investigation to its conclusion. As they combed further into the woods, a local fisherman reported sighting a mysterious figure lurking near an old cabin. Detective Rosen immediately dispatched officers to investigate, her gut urging her to follow this lead. Inside the cabin, a flickering light caught her attention. The door creaked open, revealing a disheveled space filled with aging furniture and dust. "Is anyone here?" she called out, but silence answered her. Rounding the corner, the officers came upon a small trapdoor leading to a basement. They hesitated before entering, but awareness of time eclipsed caution. As they descended, the oppressive darkness enveloped them. A faint whimper broke the silence, sending chills through the officers. Detective Rosen hurried down the stairs, flashlight cutting through the gloom until it landed on a small, frightened figure. "Emily!" she exclaimed, relief flooding her veins. The girl looked pale but alive, her wide eyes reflecting the glint of the flashlight. The officer quickly wrapped Emily in a blanket, but the girl looked weak, trembling with fear. "Are you hurt?" an officer asked gently, kneeling down beside her. "No," Emily whispered, each word trembling. She looked around nervously as though still trapped in the horrors of her experience. "Where's the man?" Detective Rosen asked, glancing around. "The dimly lit basement. He's gone. He left me here," Emily stammered, her voice hoarse. "He said I couldn't go back." "Let's get you out of here," Detective Rosen said, her heart racing. They carefully led Emily out of the cabin, a sense of urgency gripping them as they knew time was of the essence. As the sun broke over the horizon, casting golden light through the trees, Mark and Sarah were waiting at the campsite. Tension hung thick as they huddled near the fire pit. Suddenly, distant voices could be heard approaching, accompanied by the crunching of leaves. Mark felt a surge of hope. Detective Rosen emerged from the woods, her eyes narrowed, somber. "We found her," she announced, but Mark felt his heart drop when he glanced at their expression. It was not a mere case of getting lost. Something darker lurked beneath the surface. "Where is she?" Sarah cried, looking around frantically. "She's safe, but we need to talk," Rosen said, leading them away from the crowd. It was difficult for Mark to process the whirlwind of emotions that came swirling in. The relief felt hollow with the knowledge that a man, Old Man Harris, had been the one to take Emily. Once the initial embrace was shared, Sarah looked at Detective Rosen, their eyes locking in understanding. "What do we need to know?" "We need to talk about what happened in the woods and the identities involved," Rosen began. "The man we found, Harris, has a concerning past related to this type of activity. He'll be arrested and charged." Mark's stomach twisted at the implications. As he left the campsite for a moment, Sarah followed, sensing something larger unraveling. "Mark, have you ever—" "No," he interrupted vehemently, another layer of panic rising inside him. "I wouldn't hurt her." But Detective Rosen's probing didn't stop. Mark was not immune from the consequences of behavior that seemed erratic in the face of crisis. Frequently, his attitude could read as something more sinister when examined closely. As the details of Harris's actions unfurled, the community shifted gears, emotions rippling through the gathered families. They huddled in concern, but also judgment. Mark sensed the scrutiny of their eyes upon him. As they began to sift through the details, Sarah felt the foundations of their family shaken. There was so much to unravel, and the implications felt heavier than they could bear. Emily slowly recovered, but the psychological scars would linger long after the physical wounds had healed. The community rallied around the family, but challenges lay ahead as they struggled to piece together their lives amid whispers of misfortune and blame. In the weeks that followed, Detective Rosen kept close tabs on the case, ensuring that the man who had put their family in turmoil faced justice. The reality of the situation was stark. Those who love you can often seem the least capable of harm, yet the shadows of unseen dangers lurked all around. Mark stood by his family, grappling with the implications of the investigation and the lingering questions that grew in spite of finding Emily. The once familiar woods now bore the marks of their haunted experience, but they knew they had to find a way to move forward. With a new day dawning, they would begin the slow process of healing, one step at a time, striving toward a future that felt uncertain yet hopeful.